This scene was one of the best in the entire show because we finally got to see where the symbol came from, but obviously this wasn't the full story of the symbol and we still haven't gotten an explanation for those underground caves, which is the same exact place where those monsters that hunt and torture the people of the town have been living this entire time. But what we do know for a fact is A, there was some very shady stuff happening with the children in white. B, it all goes back to the From entity who we saw on the drawings in the caves. And all of that clearly ties back into this symbol that the children in white were praising and celebrating when Jade had that vision at the end of season 2. And I think at this point we've seen more than enough in these past seasons of the show for us to be able to guess exactly what the symbol's true meaning actually is. For example, way back in season 1, Jade ended up going down to the cellar, and this was when we saw the guy who got crushed by a boulder, which is an amazing scene and I absolutely loved seeing it. It's incredible. And this was the first time that we saw the symbol in this entire show, and obviously we were far from truly understanding its real meaning at this point of the story because without a doubt this symbol is very important. The next one was Jade getting shot at by the Civil War soldier, and this scene was obviously very crazy because we really had no idea what was going on at this time. Did he time travel or is it just schizophrenia? I mean, who knows? This guy with the gun just came out of nowhere and completely wiped Jade. It was crazy, especially when you think about all the blood and the bodies that were hanging on the trees before this happened. But this was also the second time we ever saw the symbol at all. And of course there's also that one time where Christopher showed up with the symbol bleeding from the book. In general, it's crazy how the scenes with the symbol are consistently the most freaky scenes we ever get in this entire show, with an insane amount of blood, death, and just plain out creepiness. And that's really the point that I'm trying to make here. Every single time we see the symbol, there's always something nefarious or just plain out evil going on in the background. From the Civil War soldier who looked like he was going postal on the townspeople, to the dude in the cellar, to Christopher, and obviously with the kids in white. And there's so much going on there that I can't even unpack it in this video. It can't be coincidence that the writers keep choosing to depict this symbol in this manner. They clearly want us to see that this is the root of evil. Every bad thing that's been happening since the series began, heck, even from the beginning of Fromland itself, it all goes back to this root of evil. And this is because this symbol ultimately represents the jellyfish's power. It's meant to show us what happens when his power is dominating the people. But why is Jade specifically the only one seeing it in the current story? Does Jade in particular have some special ability like how Sara also has her own? It's definitely possible, but I've also mentioned before how Jade only started seeing the symbol after he started looking for answers, not before. That's why Tom the bartender coming back at the end of season 2 is such a big deal. We saw him clearly getting killed by one of the monsters, and yet he still came back, and this was clearly an entity of some kind using his form in order to manipulate Jade, and it's the only reason Jade ever found out about the children in white and the symbol being the roots in the underground tunnels. The way I see it, these visions with the symbol are actually being sent by a singular entity rather than some sort of natural effect happening to Jade. But I don't think the one doing this is the jellyfish from the cave drawings, because when Jade was talking to Tom, Sara and Boyd were at the ruins with a clearly malicious being. It's also obvious that none of these entities have infinite power, so I suspect one of their biggest weaknesses is that they can only be in one place at once. It just makes sense for that to be the case, otherwise we'd never be able to win from a storytelling perspective. So what I'm saying right now is the Tom entity is trying to to give Jade and the humans the tools to kill the jellyfish entity, so he sends these symbol visions into Jade's mind specifically so that Jade goes looking for answers. In other words, these entities are all manipulating the humans for their own goals. And that brings us to a very interesting idea I've heard about the jellyfish not having a physical form himself, which prevents him from reaching his full power. I love this theory because it basically says the jellyfish is using the root of evil, which is connected to all the trees in the forest, to travel throughout Fromland and spy on the townspeople. It's a completely mind-boggling theory and definitely adds a lot of impact to Victor's fear about the trees moving closer to the town. It not having a real body might also be the same reason why it seemed to have been transforming the people in the dungeon into something new. And considering how Martin went from seeming to be a normal guy, then completely switched up and became evil, it would definitely make a lot of sense if what the entity was doing was trying to make a new vessel with those three people in the dungeon. And the only time we ever get to see Christopher in the entire show was when Jade saw the vision of him holding the book and the symbol was bleeding, which is crazy, man. And we still don't even know if Christopher died, so my assumption is he's somehow still alive. Like, people used to say that he was the voice that was talking to Jim at the end of season 1. Maybe that's possible. He's somehow communicating with them, trying to warn them and prevent them from being used with the symbol like he himself was. That's definitely a possibility. It could be the entity somehow took over Christopher's body using the symbol, but it was a temporary thing, and that's how he caused the massacre in Victor's flashback. It might be a similar explanation for what happened with the Civil War soldier that Jade saw in that vision. I also want to point out that the people who are infected by the skaters also had those white eyes like that Civil War soldier, so that might be the connection there. We've also seen the monsters having these white eyes as well. That might be some sort of effect from the entity's power. I also want to say that maybe drawing the symbol using blood or something like that is what unlocks its true power. We've already gotten a hint of blood magic with Boyd having to say, "My blood is your blood," when he was passing on the worms to Smiley. There's definitely a lot of possibilities when it comes to the From symbol and what it really means for this story, but one thing that we know for a fact is that basically every time we've gotten to see it on screen, there was clearly something very, very evil taking place at each individual moment. And the best example of what I'm talking about is Jade seeing the children down in the tunnels. I absolutely loved this scene. The way the kids were placed on those rocks that could have easily been altars made it look like they were being sacrificed to the entity. And that's why I think this symbol represents the entity's power. And it can't be coincidence that they chose to depict it like this, because ultimately I think it's the root of evil. Everything that we're seeing right now in this story all started with this ritual that was taking place in this moment, and we know that because of the cave drawings, which might have even been made by the monsters themselves, maybe before they were turned into whatever they are right now. These cave drawings clearly depict the symbol and the children on the altars below it, and then afterwards is when we get to see the jellyfish demon. So in my mind, it's saying the sacrifice of the children is what summoned the jellyfish or gave it power in this realm that we call Fromland. And something interesting about this idea of the entity lacking a physical form is that the voices told Sara bad things happened in the past because of the people who came in 2 cars at the same time. So if Christopher also came in with 2 cars, just like what happened with Jade, this could be foreshadowing that the entity is in fact using the symbol to take control of some people's bodies and then using those bodies to commit massacres for him so that he can become stronger, like in Victor's backstory and possibly with the Civil War soldier as well. I also want to remind you that we've only seen part of the cave drawings and there's clearly a lot more to the story of the entity and this root of evil. I'm very curious what would happen if somebody went into the dungeon dimension and made his way into the underground tunnels. I wonder what they would find from that other dimension in these same tunnels. The first episode of season 3 will be dropping in about 8 or 7 days, and I'll definitely be making a video about that. But watch this video where I talk about how the entity's been watching Boyd for so much longer than any of us realize.